Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Faros Weekly. We'll continue from where we stopped last year in the leadership space, and we'll talk today about new pathways. Just to recap from where we stopped, we were talking about the three elements of leadership struggle. Usually, we go through a change or a setback, and that create tension, and the tensions, based on the degree of course and the severity of it, can lead into being out of balance. And we talked about how this out of balance thing can generate negative energy. And the idea behind the model here is to give us a complete coaching engagement assignment that can lead us from addressing this negative energy and convert it into adaptive energy through three stages. The first one, to become grounded, which is really preparation to get the individual in the right space. So we work here on the growth mindset, we work on the resilience, we start to help them to understand the different types of tension around them, and then get them focused and get them aligned to be able to deal with the situation and help them also through by finding the right support around them. And that's what we discussed just before the break for in 2018. Today we will move into the middle stage, which is exploring new pathways. And in that space here, we will focus on how we can look at the situation differently and how the individual can really renew themselves and deal with the issues that they may have so they can move forward. And then within a session or two, we will move into the final stage of the model, which is about really anchoring this adaptive energy that we started to develop away from the negative side to help us to grow and help us to harness a discipline in our leadership. So these are the three stages, and as you can see, it's a complete engagement exercise, as in coaching, and it can be very useful if we master the skills around how we can approach a client with the model and how we can use it. Now, to be able to work in this model, we will continue today to focus on the area of reimagining the situation to explore new pathways and reinventing the self, and also to start to address the blind spots. And that will be also something that we may recall some of the blind spots work that we did in the personality side. So let's start by reimagining the situation. Obviously, the best way to start, if you may recall before the break, we introduced the tension map. And the tension map is the struggle between the traditions and the aspirations of the individual. And that's about the past and the future. So traditions in the place, like the culture of the organization, their capacity to take change. And the aspirations is what I'm trying to achieve and what I'm really trying to accomplish in this organization. Versus the inward and outward looking as in the relationship I have, and the inward is identity, whether what's happening here is supported by my beliefs and my personal values or not, and whether I have the relationships that can take me forward. Now, I will use today an example. It's a real example from a coaching engagement I'm in right now. And it's a senior executive who is managing a group of companies. And his tension map produced the shape you see in the front of you here. So the tension map has a very high aspirations and very low in traditions, which means and he doesn't have any issues in the relationship or the identity side. So his aspiration is actually presenting themselves as challenging to the organization, and the tradition is actually not supportive, or the way he ran the organization in the past and the culture of the place is basically very low in support of the aspiration, and really there is not much in the relationship and the identity that we need to worry about. Just to explain to you what I mean by the tradition being low here or moderate, the organization has been running in a format that is more of a family format. It's not like the business itself is eight very large businesses, and it's running very major projects. But the culture inside the organization is more of I pat your back, you pat mine. So scratch your back, you scratch mine. So it's a very friendly environment and family-like environment. So really, the tradition there is not to the same level of aspiration that he brings, and as a result of that, that presents some challenges for him moving forward. While what he's trying to achieve with the organization is really the identity part and the relationship part, he enjoys very high respect, so there is no challenges there, and he has very strong value, understanding of what he's trying to achieve. So, what is it that he's trying to achieve? The organization for the last 3 years, after a decade of growth, started to deteriorate. So the performance started to go low. And his aspiration now is to put this back on track. However, to put it back on track, he needs to change the whole culture of performance to be results driven and to reward for performance. Hence, the challenge he has with the organization, which has been working on an equal basis, which means all of us gets a bonus, whether we perform or not. There is no differentiation. All of us need to be rewarded. That has been the tradition. His aspiration now is clear about if he want to excel, he need to differentiate, and he need to reward high performers who actually started to leave the organization due to lack of differentiation. So that's a challenge. And he started to implement a performance management system to be able to roll out differentiation and link awards to performance. As a result of that, he started to get very high resistance, and things basically people started to work around the system, try to bypass the system, try to complain a lot. And that created a lot of setbacks that delayed the implementation of the system. Now, he tried the hard way, and that obviously did not work and caused him a lot of problems. And his challenge was to find new pathways that lead to meaning and fulfillment in what he does in the organization and how he lead the organization forward. And the best way to start here is to navigate through tensions of traditions and aspirations. So we need to navigate here between the culture components and how it's affecting him, and again it's his aspirations and what he's trying to achieve, so for us to find a new pathways that can lead us forward. Important here that we focus on the situation, try to reimagine the situation, try to reimagine, or basically, if you may recall from the narrative sessions that we had, try to tell the story and see if we can reimagine this in a different way, because the way that we have in hand is not working. We also need to look at how the individual, being the executive here, contributing to the problem, contributing whether positively or negatively to the problem, because that is part of the solution, of course, if you can understand the level of contribution. To be able to do this, we need to navigate, number one, through the tensions of traditions and aspirations. So a good coaching discussion here will be around the setbacks. Try to understand the setback that the individual went through, trying to implement a performance management system, and then his struggle, not getting the support he needs to move forward. A good learning out of this is try to dive deep into the individual to see if that actually generated any negative emotions inside him. That's an individual who worked with the organization for a long time and had the respect of the people around him. And he thought that the people also will follow him anywhere he goes. Now, this struggle may be affecting him in multiple ways. Number one, of course, that he feels now that he's not getting the support he needs. And he may also feel that there is some alignment between what he's trying to achieve and his core purpose in life, because he appreciates relationships. But now he feels he's losing relationships because he's driving performance. So that in itself also can generate negative emotions. And as we know, behaviors are driven by emotions. So whatever he does going forward, emotions here is an issue. So we need to to really dive deep inside the individual to see what sort of dissonance this setback has caused him, and see if there's any beliefs that's driving those emotions, because emotions are driven by beliefs. Whether those beliefs that the people around him, are not capable, or the people around him basically are complacent, and they will not even try to follow what he's trying to achieve. We need to start to work through the beliefs to help him to sort this out. And then, of course, we start to define some adaptive beliefs that can help us to adapt to the new situation that we're trying to go through. I'll give you an example here. Obviously, after the first wave of implementation, and when he discovered that people trying to bypass the system, he lost faith in many of the people around him. Although he knew them for a long time, and he had very good relationship with them, but as a result of this, he started to believe that basically they were abusing the system and abusing, the relationship and the trust he had in them. So he started really to have all these negative beliefs around him, which doesn't help. There is, as I'm sure you will agree, there is a simple principle in management that I will work with what I have in hand. So he needs to work with the resources he has. The problem is to find these adaptive beliefs about them that can help him to restore his trust and confidence. So we started to talk about some of their successes in the past, what they have managed to achieve, why they ended where they ended, what affect them, and start to help him really to see how he can make a better use of what he has in hand to drive performance. And in many of the cases, it was a matter of education, just get them to see the relationship. If we do not improve performance, where the organization is going after 3 years of bad performance. And that helps us to develop some new adaptive beliefs to move forward with the organization. Now, of course, that takes a lot of energy on the individual. So it was also important for us to work on his energy to ensure that he has the energy to stand in the front of them, talk, and advocate his ideas to implement the new performance management system. And that was an important part of the process as well, to build the energy into him and see how can we build different venues of engagement for him with the individuals, with the group, with the front line, when he can engage and generate positive energy instead of negative energy that he was immersed in. That also leads to discussion, of course, if he needs new skills in maybe public speaking, new skills maybe in connecting to people, in emotional intelligence. Give him techniques and some readings and tools that can help him to be more productive in driving the message through. So that was another way for us to understand how he can proceed here. So we can look here at his civil as an example, to look at the competences and see what is it that he needs to help him to be able to face the challenge moving forward. So we try to equip him with the tools he needs. Now, it's very important here that we get this short-term, long-term balance, because most of the cases you will find them, as you drive things, get distracted by the short-term balance. Short-term balance, maybe I have a quarter review or an end year results, and we end into the space of things that is urgent but not important, or not important and not urgent. So it's important here that we help them also to balance. It's a fine balance, but I also believe that the long term is the best short term strategy. The long term is the best short term strategy. So we need them to keep their eyes on the horizon in terms of how he wants to drive performance, even if there is some short term requirements for him to fulfill. He need to maintain the focus on the long term. So we started to look, the distraction came from the quarterly reviews. And the quarterly reviews really was about he doesn't want the results are going down south, not north. And he doesn't want people to feel even worse by the performance management system that can even distract them from achieving the short term results. So, what we needed to do is to help him to keep the importance of the long term and maybe ease the pressure a little bit in terms of the reward system to instead of what the solution we came to here is the following. He used to basically consider performance that anything above 70% to I think 80% or 85%, he would consider that as meeting target, and anything above 85% as exceeding targets. Uh, and then he moved when he implemented the system that meeting target means 100% and exceeding target is above 100%. That was a big jump for the organization. And when he started to see the quarterly results not getting there and people being distracted because they started to lose hope of their ability to meet the targets to the new cutoff limits, we basically did not throw away the whole concept of performance management, but we lowered the bar a little bit. So he decided to bring it down to 85. So 85 to 95 will be meeting targets, and above 95 will be exceeding target. So the pressures on the short term should not affect the long term strategy, but maybe we need to find easier solution that can help us to go through the process and maintain focus on the long term strategy. Now, it's key here that the individual does not lose hope in the goal or does not see that the obstacle make him doubt the goal. So it's important that we keep him focused on the goal, and the obstacles through solution focused or appreciative inquiry or any other tool we have, we help them to address the obstacles because obviously that's the only way to go if the performance of the business is not going well, and that hopefully will maintain the energy focused on the goal that he needs to achieve. So this is how we navigate through the tensions of traditions and aspirations to help the individual to drive through into a safer place. And that's the first part of it. The second part of it, of course, is about the individual and how they reinvent themselves. The individual has certain ways of leading people, certain models of dealing with issues and dealing with organizational challenges, and that in itself may be contributing to the problem in either a positive or a negative way. So we need to, as coaches, we need here to help them to see how they approach that. So as an example, in our case here, our leader had a back door open all the time. So if I'm a middle manager in this organization and a frontline manager doesn't get what he wants from me, what they will do, they will walk to the big boss and try to sort it out. And then the big boss may not give them an answer, but what they will do, they will go to the middle manager and put pressure on them. So that model of operation, of course, was not helping the business. So what we need to do is to understand what style of leadership and models that they have, and then help them cognitively to see how that is affecting their ability to achieve the goals. And hopefully they will be able to reinvent themselves in that space with a new model. So one of the discussions that we had around that specific behavior, the backdoor behavior, is how to ensure that, yeah, he can keep his door open and people can walk through and tell him what they think. And then he will have like standard template answer. Have you talked to your boss about this? No. I suggest you should raise it with the boss and see what is it that you can, between both of you can figure out a solution. And if you still have problems with that, let me know and we'll see what we can do. So basically, he started to close that back door slowly to facilitate the process of direct communication between the employee and their managers. And that was a leadership style that really needed to change, to close the back door and try to streamline communication through the correct channels. And of course, they need to change themselves to adapt to the current situation. The current situation is the performance is not, the business is not performing, which means you cannot just continue not to differentiate between performance. You need now to adapt yourself to the fact that you will differentiate and you will reward for performance, and you will be serious about it, not only in talk about it but implementing it. So kind of you need to get serious about what you are doing based on adapt the situation you're in and adapt yourself to those behaviors. uh, that of course is an important part of the coaching conversation, but we will discover as we progress with the process of coaching that we will face the blind spots. And the blind spots is something that we are familiar with, although today I will expand beyond what we usually talk about in the blind spots. I love this quote. It reads the following: blind spots are the product of an overreactive automatic mind and an underreactive mind. It's the ghost behind the strengths. So, as we all know, from one kind of blind spots that comes from personality, it's an automatic response. So, I have a bold personality or a diligent personality or an skeptical personality. There is an automatic reaction I have in mind for situations that I face. Versus if, and this is when the automatic mind takes over the reflective mind. So, what we need to do here is to help through conversation to slow down the automatic mind and promote the reflective mind. Hence, the blind spots are the product of an overactive automatic mind and an underactive reflective mind. So that's the first part of the code. The second part of the code, of course, the ghost behind the strengths, because the actual personality blind spot in itself has some strengths. However, there is a ghost behind it which drives the blind spot itself. That's what we need to address. Now, the blind spots, we are aware of the personality blind spots, and I will remind you of it in the next slide. Today we'll also touch on the values blind spots. We'll touch base also on the strategic blind spots and the conflict blind spots. Those blind spots are important as we try to help leaders to develop the leadership to address certain challenges that they have in the workplace. The first point that we are all familiar with, and I think we have seen it many times before, and that is the personality blind spots. And in personality blind spots, if you may recall, it has the excitable, skeptical, the cautious, reserved. We cover this in details. There is a strength and there is weakness. So it helps here to bring the Hogan HDS, of course, to be able to look at the blind spots that is generated by the personality. So someone, as an example, is cautious and they are very careful. And in his case, actually, it wasn't cautious. Let me tell you what it was. He had a high skeptical and excitable preferences, and he had imaginative as well. Those really were the three elements that we needed to deal with. So excitability means he will start by sitting with energy on any new ideas, and then once he is let down, he get emotionally explosive and he can walk out of the room and things like that. Uh, Skeptical, he's also cynical in his comments in general, and his cynicism is affecting actually the morale of the people. So that's also another issue. So, as an example, we started to see a trend when the businesses, and he has 8 companies in his portfolio, the businesses, at least half of them in the last quarter of 2018, and I was just there 2 weeks ago, so he told me that in a coaching session. In the last quarter of 2018, 4 of the businesses actually achieved their targets. Now, that's great news. However, during the session, he did not applaud that at all, because his skeptical, personality was on a high, as I call it, and it kept, making cynical comments, and people really felt bad, and they approached indirectly after the meeting and said, "We don't know what to do now. We have worked hard, we achieved the quarter results, but still we are not happy." So that in itself, of course, is this, the personality in action. So it's important that we see the effect of personality, with the blind spots, and how that affect the leadership style. Now, obviously, that's the first one. The second one is the values blind spots. And the values blind spots is a very important one, because that really drives the dissonance that may happen inside us when our values does not uh, does not support what you're trying to achieve. Let me give you an example from the MVPI, as an example. Someone who has a high preference in power, and let's say, so they need to have the ability to make the decisions and implement the decisions, and that may help them actually to force things without doing the right thing, as in getting people on board or get them involved and engaged with them, and basically listen to what they are saying, because they are just practicing the value of power, and that's what's more important to them. That can be a blind spot. So yes, you have the ability to make a decision, but you really need to focus more on understanding the people for now. But you should listen. Well, you should also listen and see what's happening. So help them here to identify what values are driving them and what blind spots those values can generate in terms of their ability to bring the message across to people is very important here. Then we have the strategic blind spots. And strategic blind spots represent themselves in the choices we make. So the personality and the values uh, probably will focus greatly on the individual failings as an individual, while the strategic blind spots really it casts a wider net, because they influence the business, the group, the company, the institution, and they're really a product of what we know of what's happening around us. It's the world view, our assumptions and beliefs, our knowledge, the level of understanding of the competitive situation, and how that works for us. So they can occur virtually in any area of the organization if we are not if you are not looking with an eye of details based on data and analysis and trends, seeing patterns in the organization. Uh, and as coaches, we are trained to seeing patterns. So it's important here that we start to help our managers to also see patterns, work through systems, work through approaches that's well structured, so they can really avoid strategic blind spots in their decision making, and being able to see the big picture of what's happening around them. Many of the organizations that we have seen in the past failing is because of that. As an example, Kodak, how Kodak failed to capture the photography market, being the largest photography company before the digital age. That's just a strategic blind spot. How the most of the watchmakers missed that with the smartwatches at the time. How Wang computers, as an example, ended completely outside the business of personal computers. It's strategic blind spots. So being able to see the pattern and trend around is very important, and that's something can only happen when we maintain openness and connections to the wider picture that we are involved with. So that's another thing that we need to care for as we deal with executives in leadership position. And then, of course, the one that can be generated because of any kind of conflict. And if I have conflicts, especially destructive conflicts that can happen between executives, between teams, that in itself can create blind spots because it can lead me in a space when it can cause me to interpret every interaction through a distorted lens. And as a result, I will basically assume that people intend to cause harms, and I will react accordingly. And that will make it more difficult for me. So, starting from mapping the tension, working through reimagining the situation, working through reinventing the self, and then dealing with the blind spots that can affect my ability to lead in situation like this, whether it's personality blind spots, values blind spots, strategic blind spots, or conflict blind spots, are really the key ingredients for the whole thing about finding a pathway that can lead us forward. Now, a good coach exercise here will be maybe to address the blind spots, and that's of course one of the exercise you can do, because if you if the individual have issues in reimagining situation, you need to focus there. Reinventing themselves, you need to focus there. But the blind spots itself can actually be a very good coaching discussion. Blind spots are different from other struggle scenarios we have examined so far. The reason behind that, the blind spots may not show immediately because it is reactive, and it's automatic. It may not show immediately. It depends on the situation. And it happens when there is a situation to trigger it. And that's basically what, we may not feel. It's not just a setback that we face or a tension that we face. When it happens, it happens. And it depends on the situation we are in. So we may actually miss the warning signals. So if I have excitable personality, I may just turn into emotionally explosive situation, and I do not feel it until it's too late. So that in itself can be a space here. Become aware of the blind spots and how they translate into actions, and start to work on or embark on a path of growth and self-discovery. So some experimentation is important here. Let's say that I have an excitable personality. How can I sense that I may actually lose my temper, or I may things get out of hand? That's behavior. Maybe I need to walk out of it. If you go back and review some of the behavioral sessions we have, you'll find that there are many solutions there that can help us actually to experiment what will work for me. And then, of course, always seek supporting network that I can rely on for help when need be, either in feedback or in alerting me when things are going off track. So that again can be another coaching exercise. That brings us to the end of the session here. We're still in exploring new pathways, and next session we will discuss the healing process and the ability to envision the common ground that can help us really to drive through the new pathway before we move into deepening the adaptive energy. So that will be our next session, and I hope that you enjoyed the session today. And I may just pause here to see if you have any questions. Thank you.